NoPrepSchool.com presents Continents and Oceans, an online web course for grades 3 through 5. Part 1. Introduction. A continent is a large landmass. On Earth, we have 7 distinct continents, and they are North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Australia, Africa, and Antarctica. The ancient Greeks were the first that we know of who attempted to break the larger world down into smaller parts. They decided that there were 3 main land areas of the world: Europe, Asia, and Africa. They were guessing. They didn't know that the New World existed, or about Australia or Antarctica, and they were wrong. Early European explorers began to think about the idea of what a continent is after they started to explore the world by boat. Their definition changed over time, but originally the word started out referring to the small islands around Britain, like Ireland. The definition of the word continent changed much over time. Some geographers saw no reason to separate whole land masses into more than one part, while others had a hard time thinking of Europe, Asia, and Africa as the same land mass. Even today, there is much discussion about how many continents there are and what exactly we should call them. This unit talks about 7 continents, whose names are common to the United States. A geographer is a scientist who studies geography, which is the study of the Earth's land masses, features, and people. Once people figured out that Christopher Columbus had discovered a new landmass or continent, when he landed in the West Indies in 1492, they started thinking of the world in a new way. In fact, the new land that was discovered by Columbus became the New World, while the old lands that consisted of Africa, Asia, and Europe became the Old World. This line of thought still carries weight even today, but it became clear after Ferdinand Magellan's around-the-world expedition that there was much more to this planet than old and new. By this time, we had 4 continents: Europe, Asia, Africa, and America. But as more was learned about these lands, people became suspicious. There seemed to be an awful lot of land in the New World. In fact, there seemed to be a lot of land north of the equator and a lot of land south of the equator, but in between the two, it thinned out a bit. So a decision was made that America was really 2 places. One was north and one was south. Around the same time that the New World was being colonized, more land was discovered in the Far East. This landmass was surrounded by water on all sides, completely cut off from the rest of the world. This new landmass became known as Australia and was considered to be the 6th continent. The last continent to be discovered was Antarctica, which lies right at the bottom of the Earth. Unlike the Arctic, which is at the top of the Earth, there is land under the ice in Antarctica. This makes it a continent, while the Arctic Circle remains just a geographical area. The first people we know of to sight Antarctica was a team of Russians. Antarctica is not really that big, as you see it on this map. The process of flattening out a round globe, in addition to the landmass being on one pole, distorts its shape. The same distortion happens near the North Pole as well. Part 2. Introduction to Oceans. Now that you have a general idea about what a continent is, let's take a closer look at the stuff that surrounds them. I bet you are thinking, that's a silly thing. You already know what surrounds the continents. Water. But it isn't just plain old water, it's actually salt water. Regular water, called fresh water, is not the same thing as salt water. Salt water is not good for you, but regular water is a basic requirement for life. It powers all kinds of things that happen inside your body. You might be surprised to learn that we only have one ocean. You see, the ocean is just one continuous body of water. But to make things simple, we have named different parts of the world that are covered by salt water. These are the 5 parts of the ocean that you will learn about today: the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Arctic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and the Southern Ocean. Earth's oceans make up most of the planet. They are huge in comparison to the amount of land we have to live on. If we were to look under the ocean, we would quickly realize that there is more to these giant bodies of water than the few hundred feet we explore and use on a regular basis. So, why is the Pacific Ocean listed twice on this map? Remember, the map is a flattened out globe. The left and right sides of the map are actually connected. To make sure you remember this, we label the Pacific Ocean twice. The Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean on the planet. It runs from the North Pole to the South Pole and takes up about 65.3 million square miles. It is so big that almost 50% of the world's water is contained in this one ocean. Because of its size, it is divided up into two parts, the North Pacific and the South Pacific. The equator is the line that divides the two halves. Coming up in your worksheets, you're going to have to do this exercise. You're going to have to identify and label the 4 continents that touch the Pacific Ocean on the map. One of these continents isn't labeled, so make sure you look carefully and look back on the video so that you know all 4 of them when the time is right. Many interesting fish, sea mammals, and other mammals live in the Pacific Ocean. One example is the gray whale. The eastern North Pacific gray whales travel more than 12,500 miles each year as they migrate through the waters of the Pacific Ocean that border the North American continent. They do this so that they can give birth in warm water near the equator, while taking advantage of the abundant food supply in the cooler water near Alaska. Gray whales migrate between feeding and breeding grounds yearly. They reach a length of about 52 feet and live 50 to 70 years. The common name of the whale comes from the gray patches and white mottling on its dark skin. Gray whales were once called devilfish because of their fighting behavior when hunted. Their migration is the longest mammal migration on Earth. Part 3. The Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is the second largest, with an area of about 41.1 million square miles. The name comes from the ancient Greek and means Sea of Atlas. The Atlantic Ocean is wedged between the New and Old worlds, creating a long S shape. For thousands of years, it was a barrier between civilizations, only to be conquered with the age of exploration that sent hundreds of men out into its depths. Like the Pacific, it can be divided into north and south, with the equator running through the middle. Here it is, the Atlantic Ocean. Pay attention to the continents that surround it. Just as the gray whales migrate in the Pacific, there is another sea animal that migrates throughout the Atlantic. This animal is the sea turtle. The sea turtles of the Americas will lay their eggs on the beautiful beaches of Florida, Mexico, and the islands. Here is the turtle's life cycle. On step 1, the female goes to the beach to bury eggs. In step 2, the mother leaves. She has no more purpose. In step 3, the eggs take about 50 to 80 days to hatch. In step 4, the baby turtles crawl to the ocean and migrate thousands of miles to the middle of the Atlantic where they grow bigger. In step 5, it takes several years for sea turtles to mature and become ready to lay their own eggs. In step 6, the cycle starts again. As soon as the baby turtles are hatched on the beaches of the eastern coast of Florida, they start their migration. They head towards the beach, crashing into waves, pushing themselves further out into the open sea. They spend a year swimming, eating, and growing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. This place in the middle of the ocean is known as the Sargasso Sea, or what we now call the Sea Turtle Nursery. Part 4. The Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean is the third largest of the world's oceans and is the only ocean to be named after a country, India. It covers an area of about 28.4 million square miles and is nestled between southern Asia, eastern Africa, and western Australia. It is considered a southern hemisphere ocean because it is mostly below the equator. It is also the warmest ocean in the world. Study the Indian Ocean, you know what's coming up. The Indian Ocean is the warmest ocean, and because of the high water temperature, phytoplankton don't grow well there. Phytoplankton are microscopic plants that act as a food source for many marine animals, and since food is scarce, there are fewer animal species in the Indian Ocean than other oceans. The phytoplankton food chain. This is a chart that shows how important phytoplankton are as a food source. A food pyramid is a way to show how all animals are connected by what they eat. Plants are on the bottom of the food pyramid, which means all animals depend on them for food, even if they don't actually eat them. Phytoplankton are at the bottom of the pyramid, which means so many sea animals depend on them, even if they don't eat them. Other animals will eat the phytoplankton, and then other animals will eat those animals, and then bigger animals will eat those animals, all the way up to the chain of the shark. So even though the shark does not eat phytoplankton, phytoplankton is important to him.